Barbara McQuiston, who is the chair of the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, the Diana Initiative, which if you're not familiar with what that is at NATO, you'll be able to learn in just a minute. So Barbara, thank you so much for being here. And Tom from Microsoft, we've had a great pleasure to partner with you on a number of occasions. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
Let's dive right in, and I'm actually going to start with you, Tom, first, if I may. As we were just discussing with Anne a minute ago, so much of the global cyber infrastructure exists on private sector platforms, and there's a real need for government and industry to work together. So let me ask you this. Recognizing that cyber operations are becoming a common fixture in modern conflicts, what kinds of multi-stakeholder partnerships are necessary for effective cyber deterrence, whether that's through denial or whether that's through punishment? And what do you see as the roles and responsibilities of government versus industry?
Well, great question, and we could talk for way more time than we have to explore all of that. But let me say this. I think that both components, both deterrence by denial and deterrence by consequence or deterrence by punishment, are going to be critical to bringing under control the challenges that we face. And I'll start with by denial. And that's where the private sector in particular has the greatest role to play in collaboration many times with government, but also just on our own. So Microsoft is at a challenging time now because we were compromised by a Chinese actor last summer, as is, I think, well known, and then again by the Russian SVR towards the end of last year. Two significant compromises of the Microsoft corporate environment that gave those actors access to some customer email. So not okay. And not okay from Microsoft's perspective, a real wake-up message for us that as we built incredibly good and sophisticated tools for our customers, we weren't doing a good enough job ensuring that our own corporate environment was as secure as it needed to be. And that's turned into a major initiative across the company we call the Secure Future Initiative around, around security by design, by default, and by operation. We've mobilized 34,000 engineer full-time equivalents who are working around the clock on a wide range of initiatives across those various endeavors, with the ultimate goal being we have to be, because of the degree to which our customers rely on our technologies, we have to be the world's most secure computing environment. It's essential. And our CEO recognizes that. He's literally getting reports every week from the teams that are working on this and is directly involved. But he and the other corporate leadership have put a big, significant portion of their compensation dependent upon our execution of these security things. And we're driving it through the whole company by making everybody's annual review and rewards process dependent upon security. As Satya Nadella, our CEO, said, security has to be our top priority. If you have conflict in things you're going to do, make it about security. And so this is a reinvigoration of a security culture within the company. I got to say, it's unbelievably energizing to see the degree to which the entire company is pivoted into this and is working hard on it. But we have to do it. Where we need to work closely with government on regulation, and on how we address one of the problems that Ann Neuberger was talking about, which is the challenge that we see with our adversaries going after critical infrastructure. It was actually our Microsoft team that discovered the Chinese having opened these web shell backdoors across a wide range of critical infrastructure in the US and in other countries as well, a little over a year ago, last April. And we notified government about that, and we've been partnering with government on how to identify the critical infrastructure organizations that have been compromised, how to address that. As we think about both defense and resilience for those organizations, they tend to be smaller, they tend to be less well-resourced, and government needs to think about how it can help with both the resources and the incentives to lift the cybersecurity of these organizations. And primarily that means by moving them to the hyperscale cloud. Whether it's us or our competitors, the hyperscale cloud is where security is the greatest and where security innovation is going to happen. then on the other hand, you have the need for the consequence. And, you know, Ann Neuberger was talking about the impact of ransomware. Just a couple data points. In the US alone, there have been over 389 healthcare institutions that have been successfully targeted by ransomware criminals. And there was a study by the University of Minnesota that attributed 67 deaths to ransomware activity just between 2017 and 2021. It's a serious problem, and it's a problem that we need to deter, not just because, not by just raising the defense capability, but we have to reduce the volume of attacks. So Microsoft was successfully compromised twice in the last 18 months, and that's not okay. On the other hand, over that same period, we had adversaries targeting our corporate environment 80 million times. And so you have to think about how successful do you expect the private sector to be ultimately in raising the level of defense. Now, we can do better. Microsoft has to do better. We can do better with critical infrastructure. But as much as we were facing those attacks, our data shows that our customers are attacked by either nation states or cyber criminals 345 million times every day. So we have to reduce the volume of attacks. And that means we need not just deterrence by denial, but deterrence by consequence. And that's where we need to partner more closely with government, however we can, and we are working with government partners on that, but it's a uniquely governmental role. And we need government to step up on what it can do through attribution. The alliances that Ms. Neuberger talked about are great, but we need governments to move more quickly, to be more specific about attribution, to be specific about the norm or the international legal principle that was violated, and then there have to be consequences.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, you know, some really interesting and important data points in terms of the scale of the problem and the volume, as you were mentioning. And Barbara, I'd love to bring you into the conversation here, because picking up on what Tom was talking about and what Anne was mentioning earlier, you know, NATO is facing arguably its greatest test in the alliance's 75-year history. And you have a really interesting role as the chair of the Diana initiative, and as you're working to ensure that the alliance remains fit for purpose, tell us a little bit about how NATO is adapting to the evolving cyber threat landscape and what kinds of innovative efforts are underway to strengthen NATO's cyber deterrence capacity.
Well, as my role as the chair of NATO Diana, I've been very excited to see how innovation is coming into the conversation. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, we're putting out challenges there. In fact, one of the challenges last year and this year includes data security and interoperability, because we want to get really sort of the bright engineers and scientists and entrepreneurs that can have ideas that they can put forward that have an impact not only in defense and security, but also the commercial area. As you can see, for national security, for NATO security, for across the alliance, these are areas that are just as important in the commercial realm for information security as it is for the military security. So the ideas that can come forward here, we need to not only be able to elicit it from the human capital across the NATO alliance, but then to also be able to accelerate its development, accelerate the business itself so that we can get these solutions out into the market and out into use for NATO allies. So this is a very, very important area, I think, in cybersecurity as we look towards a lot of the innovation also that's going on across NATO, the science and technology organizations looking at a lot of research and development and the defensive tools that are needed that can be implemented, and then also looking at sort of the digital transformation that's going on. We're more and more reliant on the data and on the capabilities that we need to have in the field and at the edge of where we operate. So this is something that is a large theme of all the activities, touches on NATO across the board. But being able to have the dual-use technology come in and very quickly play a role and very quickly be able to give you capabilities in the field and also be able to accelerate these ideas as we need them to keep keep at the pace of change and adoption that's needed for secure defense.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there's a couple of things I want to pick up on in terms of your response just now. We were chatting previously in the green room, and one of the things that we were discussing is that when it comes to NATO and its capabilities, so often diplomacy and armaments tend to dominate the conversation. But as you were alluding to a minute ago, you know, it's really important to also focus on the role of dual-use technologies. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you see that fitting into the alliance's capabilities, its defense posture, and where we go from here. You know, what kinds of cyber threats are you all most concerned about, and how are you thinking about dual-use technology in relation to those?
In many ways, we're looking at information security and interoperability across the alliance, and also looking at zero trust systems and a lot of the security implications that defense and security think about when they're putting things in the field and information in the field. With AI technology, sort of making sure that we can have a robust system that's defendable even with different and new attack surfaces. So it's a very rapid and quick pace environment, and how quickly can we take an idea, take a technology, and be able to adopt it into the field for being able to be responsive right away. But the ideas and the resources for emergent and disruptive technology are coming from the commercial space and from the entrepreneurs. So how closely can we connect with the security need, with the entrepreneurs that are actually coming up with these solutions? So we're looking to not only present the opportunity to accelerate the ideas, but also to be able to look at NATO overall changing in the way it does rapid adoption of the technology, so that we can actually do this as a united alliance across the board and be able to modernize and quickly adapt to the threat. I mean, a lot of the partners within the NATO alliance are constantly fielding these threats. That come from the Baltics, other regions individually, and how well can we actually position technology to help that in that pace to be defending themselves with this. We also need to think about the industrial base and the startup companies, how many tools and how much we can actually support, so we have that resilience in the industrial base, and we have the new technology playing a significant role there.
That's great. And, you know, it would be, when we think about emerging tech and its role, you know, we have to take a moment to focus on the role of AI. And Tom, I'd like to come back to you now with this. You know, let's talk about AI. And in particular, from your vantage point at Microsoft, how are you seeing AI shape both the opportunities for both cyber attackers and cyber defenders? What are you seeing take place, and what are you trying to prepare for?
Yeah, so our president, Brad Smith, has his book called Tools and Weapons, and certainly there is great concern about AI as the potential for our adversaries using AI technologies as a weapon. And one place where I can say I think the foundation innovation companies that are working on foundation models for AI, where we have a lot of good collaboration and communication, is what are we seeing in terms of adversary use of these technologies in their early days? And we have we observed some of the nation-state actors that we track utilizing OpenAI and Microsoft APIs to experiment with AI, but experiment in the same way that everybody is. You know, does it help us write code? Does it help us create images? Does it help us do the things that those technologies were intended for? And we just saw them experimenting, not doing anything particularly nefarious with it, but it was a concern. And so Microsoft adopted a policy that goes beyond anything we've ever done before, where we said if we see any adversary that we track, a nation-state actor or a cyber criminal syndicate, any of the roughly 600 that we track, utilizing our technology, we're going to affirmatively block it so that they can't use those technologies. And will that be a perfect solution? No, they can work through intermediaries, they can find ways to work around it, and it's always that cat and mouse game with our adversaries, but it's a step that we're taking. What's interesting, though, is to date, across all of the AI companies, We're all watching, and none of us have seen any adversary doing anything unexpected or particularly threatening with AI technology so far. Where we've seen the most use is in influence operations, especially by Russia and China, who have experimented a lot with using AI technologies to create so-called deepfakes, especially deepfake videos. What's most interesting, and we'll actually be publishing a report just at the end of this week on what we're seeing in terms of adversaries' efforts to influence all of the elections that are happening globally, and the upcoming U.S. election in particular, is in recent trends, what we're seeing is the adversaries are stepping away from using AI and are going back to what we call cheap fakes, where they're just taking existing images or other materials and making slight alterations or putting them in different contexts than were originally intended, or cropping them in some way to create a message that wouldn't otherwise be conveyed by the image. And we're seeing them moving back to that because they are actually seeing that they're more influential with that kind of content than with AI-generated video. Now, that's just probably a temporary thing. In the longer run, we have to be very vigilant for what we're seeing our adversaries do and be prepared to work with governments on how we respond to that, to minimize the risks. At the same time, though, I have this great confidence that in the intermediate term, and I think the timeline is something, and I'm making this up completely, but something like 3 to 7 year timeline, that AI is going to provide cybersecurity defenders with an asymmetric advantage over our attackers. And there's several reasons for that. The first reason is, to do AI, you need the world's best data scientists. And the private sector, especially those who are working on AI models, have those people. Now, not uniquely. Certainly the Chinese have a large number of very, very talented experts, and others do as well. But we have that. The second thing is unbelievable financial resources. So Microsoft is committing more than $12 billion every quarter to building the data centers with the GPUs that we need around the world to both train and operate these AI models. And our competitors are making similar investments. That's the greatest private sector capital investment in history. And it's coming from companies that have great financial resources. When you think about that, and you think about the ability of the cybercrime syndicates, or even most of the world's governments, they can't compete with the need to build those systems which they require to be able to do the work that they're going to want to do to counter the defenses we can build. So that gives us a significant advantage. And it takes the number of even governments that you have to be thoughtful about in this area down to a small number. And then there's the third component. Microsoft, because of the breadth and popularity of our products, we are now getting 78 trillion signals from our ecosystem that come into Microsoft every day. And that covers everything from endpoint devices to the most sophisticated cloud services and everything in between. That is a unique data set that we can train defensive AI models against. And we've seen that be successful in Ukraine with our Defender for Endpoint identifying Russian wiper malware and blocking it, not because we had a signature, not because we'd seen it before, because the algorithm said, wait, this code is up to no good. We are going to be able to build more sophisticated algorithms that are going to look at that stream of data and see adversary activity before it impacts customers and block it. I'm confident that that's going to be a capability. I know our teams are working on those capabilities now, and I'm confident that in that 3 to 7 year time frame, if we don't create a significant asymmetric advantage, we won't have done our job.
Which again goes back to the human capital across the NATO countries that want to contribute to security and have ideas to put forward and emergent technology that can make a big difference. We need to be able to have opportunities for them to put their solutions forward for our national security.
I agree with that. And the other thing that is inherent in that statement by me is the need for the adoption of the hyperscale cloud. And again, irrelevant whether it's ours or our competitors, but those kinds of defenses can only be provided in the hyperscale cloud. And sovereign clouds not only will be targeted by our adversaries, as we saw in Ukraine, but they can't provide that same rich degree of cyber defense through the application of AI algorithms. So we need to, in the private sector, working with our government partners, has to improve security across all these technologies, but then also work with our partners on how we make those defenses really both available and effective.
Well, Tom, Barbara, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more we could discuss, and I know I have so many more questions for you, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So let me thank you for being here. Thank you for your respective leadership that you are forging ahead with, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate with you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.